Human girl cut her finger on the broken relic. Her purple blood made the aliens kneel immediately. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The abandoned alien museum stood silent under the crimson light of 3 distant moons. Inside, 16-year-old Grace Mitchell dusted ancient artifacts with careful precision, completely unaware that her ordinary summer job was about to change the course of galactic history. For generations, humans had occupied the lowest rung of the interstellar social ladder. After Earth's reluctant entry into the Galactic Confederation 2 centuries ago, humanity had been relegated to menial roles: cleaners, laborers, and maintenance workers for the more evolved species. Despite their technological achievements that had propelled them to the stars, humans were considered primitive, fragile, and ultimately insignificant in the grand cosmic tapestry. Grace had never known any different. Like her parents before her, she was born into service, expected to fulfill her role without complaint. Her assignment at the Museum of Lost Civilizations on Proxima Station was considered a prestigious posting for a human, dusting relics and maintaining the climate systems for artifacts from long-extinct alien species. Careful with that display, human, called Curator Vexel, his 8 compound eyes narrowing as he monitored Grace from across the vast exhibition hall. The Trisarian administrator's exoskeleton clicked against the polished floor as he approached. That section contains irreplaceable artifacts from the Ascended Ones. Yes, Curator, Grace replied, lowering her eyes respectfully as she'd been taught. She adjusted her uniform, a drab gray jumpsuit with human staff emblazoned across the back in bold lettering, and returned to her work. The Ascended Ones were something of a mystery, even to the Confederation's most knowledgeable historians. They had apparently vanished from the galaxy over 50,000 years ago, leaving behind only fragments of their civilization, strange devices, incomprehensible writings, and beautiful crystalline structures that defied analysis. The museum's central chamber was dedicated entirely to their legacy, a testament to their importance in galactic history. As Grace carefully moved her electrostatic cloth over a display case containing what appeared to be a shattered purple crystal, she couldn't help but admire its beauty. Unlike other relics in the museum, this one seemed to pulse with an inner light, shifting colors subtly as she viewed it from different angles. "What do you think it was used for?" she asked quietly. Curator Vexel made a dismissive clicking sound with his mandibles. "Your species' curiosity is both predictable and pointless. The purposes of the Ascended Ones are beyond human comprehension. Now finish your tasks before the diplomatic delegation arrives." Grace nodded silently, but her eyes remained fixed on the crystal fragments. Something about them seemed to call to her in a way she couldn't explain. When Vexel finally moved to another section of the museum, she leaned closer, examining the relic with unrestrained fascination. The crystal had clearly once been whole, a sphere perhaps, or some more complex geometric shape. The edges where it had broken were jagged and sharp, catching the light in hypnotic patterns. Without thinking, Grace reached out, her fingers hovering just above the surface. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," came a low voice from behind her. Grace jumped, nearly knocking over the display. She turned to see Tyler Grant, another human worker assigned to the museum. At 19, he had already been working there for 3 years and had taken it upon himself to mentor newer staff like Grace. "You know the rules," he said quietly, glancing around to ensure no alien supervisors were within earshot. "Look, don't touch. Especially not the Ascended One stuff. Vexel would have you expelled from the station faster than you can say sorry." "I know," Grace sighed, withdrawing her hand. Don't you ever wonder about them? The Ascended Ones, I mean. What were they like? Where did they go?" Tyler shrugged. "Doesn't matter much to people like us, does it? Our job is to clean, not to question. But don't you think it's unfair? We reached the stars on our own, developed faster than light travel independently. Yet here we are, treated like we're inferior?" Tyler finished for her, his voice tinged with resigned acceptance. That's just how it is, Grace. The Confederation has existed for millions of years. Compared to them, we're infants. Best to accept our place and make the most of it. Before Grace could respond, an announcement echoed through the museum's communication system. Attention, all staff. The diplomatic delegation from the hegemony will arrive in 30 minutes. All human personnel are to complete their duties and report to service corridors until the tour concludes. Tyler gave Grace a sympathetic pat on the shoulder. Better finish up. The hegemony representatives aren't known for their tolerance of humans. As Tyler walked away, Grace returned to her work, efficiently dusting the remaining displays. When she reached the broken crystal again, she paused, that strange sense of connection returning stronger than before. The diplomatic delegation would arrive soon, and she knew she should complete her tasks and retreat to the service corridors as instructed. Yet something compelled her to linger. The crystal seemed to pulse more intensely now, as though reacting to her proximity. Grace glanced around. Curator Vexel was busy in the preparation room, and the other staff members were occupied with their own tasks. Before she could reconsider, she carefully lifted the display case's protective cover. The museum's security systems were designed to detect unauthorized movement of artifacts, but not the opening of cases for cleaning and maintenance, a task frequently assigned to human workers. Grace's heart pounded as she extended her hand toward the broken crystal, telling herself she would just feel its texture for a moment, then close the case and be done with it. Her fingertips had barely brushed the surface when one of the jagged edges sliced into her index finger. Grace gasped, instinctively withdrawing her hand. A drop of blood welled from the small cut, and as she reached for a cleaning cloth in her pocket, the drop fell, landing directly on the broken crystal. What happened next would forever alter the course of galactic history. The moment her blood made contact with the ancient relic, the crystal flared with blinding purple light. The fragments began to vibrate, rising slightly from their display cushion. Grace stepped back in alarm as energy crackled around the artifact, forming tendrils of luminescent purple that writhed and twisted in the air. Then, impossibly, her blood, her ordinary human blood, began to glow with the same purple radiance. The cut on her finger sealed instantly, but the strange phenomenon didn't stop there. Grace watched in horror and fascination as veins of purple light spread beneath her skin, tracing the path of her circulatory system. There was no pain, only a warm, tingling sensation that spread from her fingertips to her entire body. "What's happening?" she whispered, staring at her hands as they pulsed with unearthly light. The museum's alarm systems suddenly blared to life, and Grace knew she had seconds before security personnel arrived. In a panic, she closed the display case, but it was too late. The damage was done. The crystal continued to glow, and so did she. Curator Vexel burst into the chamber, his exoskeleton bristling with agitation. "What have you?" he began, then froze, his compound eyes widening at the sight of Grace. Behind him came several members of the hegemony delegation who had apparently arrived early. 5 tall, serpentine beings with iridescent scales and elaborate ceremonial armor slithered into the chamber, their forked tongues flicking out to taste the air. "What is the meaning of this interruption?" demanded the lead diplomat, a hegemony elder named Cyrex whose scales bore the distinctive patterns of high rank. "We were assured this facility would be properly." The words died in his throat as he caught sight of Grace. The elder's reptilian eyes widened, and without warning or explanation, he dropped to the floor in a posture that could only be described as genuflection. One by one, the other hegemony representatives followed suit, pressing their foreheads to the ground in perfect synchronization. "The Harbinger returns," Cyrex whispered, his voice trembling with what Grace recognized as awe or fear. "The prophecy is fulfilled." Curator Vexel stood frozen in shock, his mandibles working soundlessly as he struggled to comprehend what was happening. The mighty hegemony, one of the most powerful factions in the Confederation, whose representatives would normally not even acknowledge a human's existence, were prostrating themselves before a 16-year-old human girl. I don't understand." Grace stammered, looking at her hands where the purple glow continued to pulse beneath her skin. What's happening to me? Elder Cyrex raised his head, though he remained kneeling. The sacred blood flows through you, Harbinger. You bear the essence of the Ascended Ones. Grace's mind reeled. The Ascended Ones? But they've been gone for 50,000 years. Not gone, corrected Cyrex, his voice reverent. Waiting. And now you have awakened their legacy within you. The commotion drew more attention. Museum security officers, other staff members, and the remainder of the diplomatic delegation crowded into the chamber, all falling silent at the extraordinary scene before them. Tyler pushed his way through the growing crowd, his eyes widening as he took in the kneeling hegemony diplomats and Grace's transformed appearance. "Grace, what did you do?" he whispered. Before she could answer, another voice cut through the chaos, a voice that carried authority even among the diverse species present. "Stand aside. Let me see this phenomenon for myself." The crowd parted to reveal Ambassador Krell, the highest-ranking Confederation official on Proxima Station. The avian diplomat's feathers were sleek and black, his bearing regal as he strode forward, flanked by his personal guards. Unlike the hegemony representatives, Krell did not kneel. His sharp eyes studied Grace with clinical detachment. "Explain this," he commanded, addressing no one in particular. Curator Vexel finally found his voice. "Ambassador, I assure you this human will be severely punished for interfering with the artifacts. She has clearly activated some dormant technology that—" "Silence," Krell said, raising a taloned hand. "Elder Cyrex, explain your behavior. Why do representatives of the mighty hegemony kneel before a human?" Cyrex slowly rose, though his posture remained deferential. "This is no mere human, Ambassador. She bears the sacred blood of the Ascended." Murmurs rippled through the assembled crowd. Even Ambassador Krell seemed taken aback by this claim. "The Ascended Ones are a historical footnote," he said dismissively. "A civilization that reached its peak and disappeared, as all eventually do. Their artifacts are curiosities, nothing more." "You are wrong," Cyrex replied, with a boldness that surprised everyone present. "The hegemony has preserved the ancient texts. We have maintained the prophecies that speak of the Harbinger who would one day return, bearing the sacred blood that flows purple with power." As if responding to his words, the glow beneath Grace's skin intensified. She felt a strange energy building within her, neither pleasant nor painful, but undeniably powerful. "The prophecy states that when the Harbinger returns, the time of ascension will begin anew," continued Cyrex. "All who recognize the sacred blood will be elevated. All who deny it will be left behind." Ambassador Krell's feathers bristled with indignation. "This is superstitious nonsense. The Confederation does not govern based on ancient myths or religious texts. This human has clearly been exposed to some unknown technology. She will be quarantined and studied." He gestured to his guards. "Seize her." The guards moved forward, but stopped abruptly as Grace raised her hand in a reflexive gesture of protection. A pulse of purple energy emanated from her palm, not harming the guards, but pushing them gently, yet firmly backward. Grace stared at her hand in shock. She hadn't consciously directed that energy. It had responded to her fear, protecting her without conscious thought. "You see," Elder Cyrex hissed triumphantly. "The sacred blood awakens to defend its vessel." Ambassador Krell's expression darkened. "This changes nothing. The human will be contained until we understand what has happened." He turned to address the security officers. "Implement quarantine protocol." But as the security team moved forward, a new complication arose. The museum's communication system suddenly activated, displaying urgent messages from across the station. Reports flooded in of similar purple energy manifestations appearing at other Ascended Ones artifact sites throughout the facility. And more concerning still, incoming transmissions from other Confederation outposts reported the same phenomenon occurring simultaneously across the galaxy. Krell's composed demeanor finally cracked. "What is happening?" he demanded. A junior communications officer, a multi-limbed Zeronian, nervously extended a data pad. "Ambassador, We're receiving thousands of reports. Every museum, research facility, and archaeological site housing Ascended One's artifacts is experiencing the same energy signature. And there's more. Speak, Krell commanded. Confederation intelligence has intercepted communications from the hegemony worlds. They're celebrating. They're calling it the return. All eyes turned to Elder Cyrex, who stood with newfound confidence. For millennia, the hegemony has safeguarded the prophecies when others dismissed them as myths. We have prepared for this moment while the Confederation buried the truth. The Harbinger has awakened the sacred blood, and the great ascension begins anew. Grace, overwhelmed by the rapid escalation of events, found her voice. I don't understand any of this. I'm not a Harbinger or whatever you're calling me. I'm just Grace. I work here. I dust displays and mop floors. Not anymore, said Elder Cyrex, with unexpected gentleness. The sacred blood has chosen you, child. The legacy of the most advanced civilization the galaxy has ever known now flows through your veins. Tyler, who had been watching silently, finally stepped forward. What does this mean for her? For humans? It was a question that struck at the heart of the matter, one that everyone present suddenly realized had profound implications. If a human, a member of one of the Confederation's most dismissed species, had been chosen as the vessel for this ancient power, what did that mean for the established order? Before anyone could answer, the crystal fragments in the display case began to resonate more intensely. The purple energy coalesced, forming symbols in the air, complex, shifting glyphs that hovered before them like living text. The language of the Ascended, breathed Cyrex. Unseen for 50 millennia. To everyone's astonishment, Grace responded, "It's speaking to me. I can understand it." The symbols shifted and flowed, and Grace's eyes tracked their movements. It says, the Ascension Protocol has been initiated. The chosen vessel will guide the worthy to evolution. Ambassador Krell's composure had completely abandoned him now. This is impossible. No one has ever deciphered the Ascended language. The sacred blood knows its own, Cyrex said simply. Grace continued to translate, her voice growing stronger as she connected more deeply with the message. The Ascended Ones didn't disappear. They evolved, transcended their physical forms. They left these artifacts as keys, waiting for a species worthy of following their path. She looked up, meeting Krell's gaze directly, something a human would never normally dare. And they chose humans. They chose us because we're adaptable, creative. Our neural patterns match theirs most closely. We're their descendants. This revelation sent shockwaves through the chamber. The implication that humans, the Confederation's janitors and manual laborers, might be the genetic descendants of the most advanced civilization in galactic history was nothing short of revolutionary. Preposterous, Krell sputtered, but his objection lacked conviction. More symbols formed in the air, and Grace continued to translate. The ascension will be offered to all, but only those who acknowledge the sacred blood will be eligible to evolve. Those who resist or deny the Harbinger will remain in their current form, while others transcend. Elder Cyrex and his companions lowered their heads once more. The hegemony recognizes the sacred blood and pledges loyalty to the Harbinger. One by one, others in the chamber began to kneel. First other humans, then representatives of various species who sensed the shifting of power. Even some of Ambassador Krell's own guards sank to their knees, responding to something primal within them that recognized the truth of what was happening. Krell himself remained standing, his feathers quivering with barely contained rage and fear. This is insurrection. The Confederation will not be overthrown by superstition and light shows. Grace felt a surge of confidence that was entirely new to her. The timid human girl who had spent her life with downcast eyes now stood tall, purple light coursing through her veins, as she addressed one of the most powerful figures in the galaxy. It's not about overthrow, Ambassador. It's about evolution. The Ascended Ones aren't forcing anyone to join them. It's a choice, but it's a choice that's now being offered to everyone. not just the species that have dominated the Confederation for millennia. As she spoke, the purple glow spread beyond her body, tendrils of energy extending outward to touch others in the room. Those who welcomed it experienced a momentary illumination of their own bodies, a brief glimpse of what the ascension might offer. This is what the ascended ones intended. Grace continued, understanding flowing into her mind from the activated relic. They reached a point of evolution where physical form was a limitation. They transcended, but they left behind the means for others to follow when the galaxy was ready. And they determined that humans, would be the ones to trigger this process? Krell's tone was incredulous, but his rigid posture had begun to soften. Not just any human, Elder Cyrex interjected. The prophecy was specific. The sacred blood would recognize its vessel, one with the capacity to understand, to connect, to bridge the gap between physical existence and transcendence. Tyler moved to stand beside Grace, his expression reflecting both awe and concern. What happens now? To Grace, to humanity, to everyone? It was a question that hung in the air, pregnant with possibility and uncertainty. Grace looked down at her hands, where the purple glow pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. I think I'm supposed to guide this process. The knowledge is flowing into me, but it's so vast. The ascended ones existed on a plane we can barely comprehend. Curator Vexel, who had been silent throughout much of the exchange, suddenly spoke. The archive. The museum contains the largest collection of ascended ones' texts and artifacts in the Confederation. If the girl can truly read their language. For the first time, Ambassador Krell showed a glimmer of pragmatism breaking through his resistance. Access to the archive is restricted to highest-level researchers. Those restrictions mean nothing now, Elder Cyrex said firmly. The Harbinger must be given full access to all ascended knowledge. The prophecy is clear. She will guide the worthy to evolution, but only if she can fully connect with the legacy left behind. A tense silence fell over the chamber as Krell considered this. Finally, he gave a curt nod. The human will be granted temporary access to the archive under strict supervision. If there is even a fraction of truth to these claims, the Confederation must understand what we're facing. Grace recognized this for what it was, not acceptance, but a strategic retreat. The ambassador was playing for time, likely hoping to find a way to contain or control what was happening. But she also sensed that resistance was futile. The process set in motion by her blood contacting the relic could not be reversed. I'll need help, Grace said, looking at Tyler. I can read the language somehow, but I don't understand all the concepts yet. Tyler nodded without hesitation. I'm with you. Elder Cyrex stepped forward. The hegemony offers its complete support to the Harbinger. Our scholars have studied the prophecies for generations. What knowledge we have is yours. More declarations of support followed, creating impromptu alliances among species and factions that had previously barely acknowledged one another. The power structure of the Proxima Station, a microcosm of the wider Confederation, was realigning itself before their eyes. Ambassador Krell watched with thinly veiled alarm as his authority eroded. This council is adjourned. Security, escort the human and her associates to the archive. Establish a perimeter and allow no unauthorized access. As the group prepared to move to the archive, Grace felt a strange sensation, as if distant minds were reaching out to her across vast distances. The connection to the ascended one's knowledge was growing stronger, more comprehensive. They're all awakening, she whispered. Every artifact, every fragment, across the galaxy. Who is awakening? Tyler asked, supporting her as she swayed slightly under the influx of information. Not who what. The network. The ascended ones left behind a dormant neural network, embedded in their artifacts. It's been waiting for the right catalyst to activate. She looked at the small cut on her finger, now healed but marked by a faint purple line. My blood. As they walked through the museum corridors, surrounded by security personnel and newly declared allies, Grace began to understand more of what was happening to her. This sacred blood, that Elder Cyrex spoke of wasn't mystical, but it was far from ordinary. Human DNA contained sequences that resonated with the technology of the Ascended Ones, sequences that other species lacked. The archive was located in the museum's most secure section, a vast chamber with environmental controls more stringent than any other area. As the door slid open, Grace gasped at the sight before her. Hundreds of artifacts, texts, and devices from the Ascended One's civilization lay arranged on specialized containment platforms, and every single one of them was now glowing with the same purple energy that coursed through her veins. "They've been waiting," she murmured. "All this time, they've been waiting for someone like me." For the next several hours, Grace immersed herself in the archive, absorbing information at a rate that should have been impossible. The artifacts responded to her presence, projecting data directly into her mind in ways that bypassed normal sensory channels. Tyler remained by her side, taking notes as she translated and explained concepts that had eluded the Confederation's best scientists for centuries. Elder Cyrex and his hegemony scholars provided context from their prophecies, which Grace now understood were not mystical predictions but encrypted instructions left by the Ascended Ones, a user manual for the next stage of galactic evolution. Ambassador Krell observed from a distance, reporting developments to the Confederation High Council. The initial shock and resistance were gradually giving way to cautious curiosity, at least among those pragmatic enough to recognize the futility of fighting against the tide of change. As the galactic day cycle waned, Grace finally stepped away from the artifacts, her mind buzzing with new knowledge. "I understand now," she announced to the assembled group. The Ascended Ones reached a state of evolution where physical form became optional. They transcended into a higher dimensional plane, but they didn't abandon this galaxy. They've been watching, waiting for the right conditions to offer the same path to other species. "And those conditions involve humans?" Curator Vexel asked, his scientific curiosity overcoming his initial fear. Grace nodded. "The Ascended Ones seeded Earth millions of years ago, inserting genetic markers into proto-human DNA. They saw potential in our species, our adaptability, our creativity, our resilience. They designed us to be compatible with their technology, to serve as bridges when the time was right." "If that's true," Ambassador Krell interjected, "why has humanity occupied the lowest tiers of Confederation society? Why would such an allegedly advanced design result in a species that has been relegated to menial labor?" It was a fair question, and one that Grace now had an answer for. Because the traits the Ascended Ones valued aren't the same ones the Confederation values. You've built a society that prizes stability, hierarchy, and conformity. The Ascended Ones valued innovation, adaptation, and independent thought, traits that human society cultivates, even if imperfectly. She gestured to the glowing artifacts. These weren't meant to be museum pieces. They're tools, components of a vast network designed to facilitate transcendence. And they respond to human DNA, specifically to a rare genetic marker that I apparently possess. Elder Cyrex nodded sagely. The prophecies speak of the pure vessel, one whose blood runs with undiluted sacred essence. Among millions of humans, you alone carry the complete genetic key, Harbinger. Tyler looked concerned. "So what happens now? Are you supposed to, ascend? Leave everyone behind?" Grace shook her head. "No, that's not the plan. I'm meant to be a conduit, not a solitary transcender. The ascension is meant to be offered to all species who are ready to accept it." She hesitated, then added, "But there's a choice involved. No one is forced to evolve. And those who choose not to?" Krell asked sharply. "They continue as they are," Grace replied simply. The Ascended Ones believed in evolution through choice, not coercion. This answer seemed to ease some of the tension in Krell's posture. "The Confederation High Council will require proof of these claims. Demonstrations, evidence." Ambassador, Elder Cyrex interrupted. "With respect, events are moving beyond the Council's authority. Already, the sacred network awakens across the galaxy. The Harbinger's emergence cannot be contained or controlled by traditional power structures. As if to punctuate this point, the communication systems in the archive activated, displaying incoming transmissions from across Confederation space. Reports flooded in of purple energy manifestations at every location housing Ascended One's artifacts. More significantly, humans throughout the galaxy were experiencing resonance effects, not as pronounced as Grace's transformation, but unmistakable signs of awakening. "It's spreading," Tyler whispered, watching the reports with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Grace nodded. "The network is establishing connections, preparing for the ascension. But there's more to do. The artifacts here are just a fraction of what exists. The Ascended Ones left behind key installations, nexus points where the network can be fully activated." She turned to Elder Cyrex. "Your people have kept the prophecies. Do they speak of the nexus chambers?" The elder's eyes widened. "The sacred temples?" "Yes, the prophecies mention 7 temples scattered across the galaxy, but their locations were never revealed." "I know where they are," Grace said with quiet confidence. "The knowledge is in the network, and the network is now part of me." She looked around at the assembled group. "I need to visit these locations to activate each nexus point. Only then can the ascension begin in earnest." Ambassador Krell bristled. "The Confederation will not authorize such a mission based on unverified claims from a human janitor." "With respect, Ambassador," Curator Vexel interjected, his scientific mind fully engaged now. "Authorization may be irrelevant. If what we've witnessed here is occurring galaxy-wide, containing this phenomenon may be impossible." A tense silence fell over the archive as the implications sank in. The established order of the galaxy, the careful balance of power that had defined the Confederation for millennia, was unraveling. And at the center of this transformation stood a 16-year-old human girl who, until hours ago, had been dusting display cases. Grace felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. The knowledge flowing through her was vast, sometimes overwhelming, but increasingly clear. She understood what needed to be done, even if the path forward was fraught with challenges. "I don't want to disrupt the Confederation," she said, addressing Krell directly. The Ascended Ones didn't envision destruction, but evolution. They believed all sentient species have the potential to transcend physical limitations, given the right catalyst and guidance. She extended her hand, allowing the purple energy to flow visibly through her fingers. "This isn't about humans taking control. It's about offering all species a choice, the same choice the Ascended Ones made 50,000 years ago." Elder Cyrex and his hegemony scholars knelt once more. "The hegemony chooses to follow the harbinger. We pledge our resources, our ships, our knowledge to the sacred journey." Similar declarations followed from representatives of other species who had gathered in the archive, drawn by the unfolding events. Even Curator Vexel, his scientific curiosity overcoming ingrained prejudice, offered his expertise in Ascended One's artifacts. Ambassador Krell stood isolated, watching as his authority diminished with each new pledge of allegiance to Grace and her mission. Finally, pragmatism prevailed over pride. "The Confederation must be represented in these developments," he announced stiffly. "I will accompany the human to these alleged nexus points to observe and report to the High Council." Grace understood the political calculation behind his words. Better to stay close to the source of changing power than to be left behind. But she welcomed his presence nonetheless. The transition ahead would be smoother with cooperation from established authorities. "We leave tomorrow," she declared, with an authority that surprised even herself. "The first Nexus chamber is located in the Cygnus Arm, on a world your charts named Tyrolean." As the impromptu council dispersed to make preparations, Tyler pulled Grace aside. "Are you sure about this? Yesterday you were worried about Vexel catching you taking an extra break. Now you're leading a galactic revolution? Evolution? Whatever this is." Grace looked down at her hands, where the purple energy continued to pulse beneath her skin. "I'm terrified," she admitted quietly. "But I also feel like I've found a purpose I never knew was waiting for me." She met Tyler's concerned gaze. Will you come with me? Try to stop me, he replied with a half-smile. Someone needs to keep your feet on the ground while your head's in the higher dimensions. The journey to Tyrolean began the following day, aboard a hegemony diplomatic vessel that had been rapidly repurposed for the mission. Ambassador Krell insisted on bringing a Confederation security contingent, while Elder Cyrex assembled a team of scholars and technicians familiar with Ascended One's lore. Grace and Tyler were given quarters befitting honored guests rather than human workers, a marked change in status that highlighted how rapidly the established order was shifting. As they traveled through hyperspace, Grace spent hours in meditation, connecting more deeply with the Ascended network. The knowledge continued to flow into her mind, some of it immediately comprehensible, some of it so advanced that her human consciousness could only grasp fragments. It's like trying to teach quantum physics to a child, she explained to Tyler as they shared a meal in her quarters. The concepts exist in my mind, but I'm still learning how to access and interpret them. And these Nexus chambers will help with that? Tyler asked, still struggling to fully understand the scope of what they were undertaking. Grace nodded. They're more than just buildings or installations. They're interfaces between dimensional planes, places where the barriers between physical existence and transcendent reality are thinnest. Each one we activate strengthens the network and expands my connection to the Ascended knowledge. Tyler considered this. And when all 7 are activated, then the ascension becomes possible for anyone who chooses it. Grace looked out the viewport at the swirling colors of hyperspace. The Ascended Ones believe that evolution should be a choice, not an inevitability. Some species will embrace transcendence. Others will remain as they are. Both paths are valid. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the bridge. Harbinger, came Elder Cyrex's voice, using the title that had now been universally adopted for Grace. We're receiving transmissions from across Confederation space. There are developments you should be aware of. When Grace and Tyler arrived on the bridge, they found a scene of controlled chaos. Multiple communication channels were active, displaying reports and images from various Confederation worlds. Elder Cyrex and Ambassador Krell stood before the main view screen, their expressions revealing a shared concern despite their ideological differences. What's happening? Grace asked. Krell turned, his feathers ruffled with agitation. Uprising. Disruption. Chaos. Choose your term. He gestured to the displays. As news of your emergence spreads, humans across the Confederation are abandoning their posts. Some are manifesting abilities similar to yours, though less pronounced. Grace scanned the reports with growing alarm. On dozens of worlds, humans were leaving their assigned jobs, gathering in public spaces, their veins glowing with faint purple light. In some locations, Confederation authorities were responding with force, attempting to contain what they perceived as insurrection. This isn't what I wanted, Grace whispered. The ascension isn't meant to be violent or disruptive. Perhaps not, Krell replied grimly. But you've upended a social order that has existed for centuries. Did you expect there would be no consequences? Elder Cyrex intervened. The prophecies speak of a time of transition, the awakening before the ascension. Some disruption is inevitable as the old order gives way to the new. People are being hurt, Grace said, pointing to footage of Confederation security forces confronting gathered humans on a space station. This has to stop. She closed her eyes, reaching out through the network that now connected her to Ascended artifacts, and by extension, to humans carrying the activation markers across the galaxy. It was difficult, like trying to direct a river with her bare hands, but she managed to project a simple message. Peace. Patience. The time is coming, but violence is not the way. Across the displays, the scenes of confrontation began to calm. Humans who had been on the verge of conflict stepped back, the purple glow beneath their skin dimming slightly as they heeded Grace's influence. Ambassador Krell watched with undisguised alarm. You can control them? Not control, Grace corrected, opening her eyes. Guide. Influence. They're responding to the network, not to me personally. She met his gaze directly. I don't want a revolution, Ambassador. I want a transformation, one that benefits all species, not just humans. Krell's expression remained skeptical, but he gave a curt nod. Your actions speak louder than words, human. Let us hope this influence of yours continues to promote peace rather than conflict. The hegemony vessel arrived at Tyrolean 3 days later. From orbit, the planet appeared unremarkable, a rocky world with shallow seas and vast deserts, long classified as uninhabitable by Confederation surveys. But as they approached, Grace felt a resonance growing stronger, a connection to something ancient and powerful buried beneath the planet's surface. There, she said, pointing to a region of seemingly empty desert. The first Nexus chamber is there. Elder Cyrex ordered scans of the area, which revealed nothing unusual. Our sensors detect no structures or energy signatures, he reported. You wouldn't, Grace replied with certainty. The chambers exist partially in other dimensional planes. They're designed to be invisible to conventional detection methods. She touched her chest, where the purple energy pulsed more intensely. But I can feel it. It's calling to me. The landing party consisted of Grace, Tyler, Elder Cyrex, Ambassador Krell, and a mixed group of security personnel and technical specialists. As their shuttle descended to the desert surface, Grace's transformation became more pronounced, the purple glow beneath her skin brightening, tendrils of energy occasionally extending beyond her physical form. When they touched down, Grace was the first to exit the shuttle, stepping onto the sun-baked sand with a confidence that belied her 16 years. The others followed cautiously, scanning the seemingly empty landscape. There's nothing here, one of Krell's security officers muttered. But Grace was already walking purposefully across the desert, drawn by an invisible pull that only she could sense. After several hundred meters, she stopped at a spot indistinguishable from any other. This is it, she announced. The entrance to the first Nexus chamber. Before anyone could question her, Grace knelt and pressed her palm against the sand. Purple energy flowed from her hand into the ground, spreading outward in complex geometric patterns that etched themselves into the desert floor. The sand began to shift, not as if being blown by wind, but as if reality itself were being reshaped. A structure materialized before their eyes, not by rising from beneath the sand, but by transitioning from some other dimensional state into physical reality. It was a temple of sorts, though unlike any architecture known to the Confederation. Crystalline spires twisted in impossible angles, creating a structure that seemed to extend in directions beyond the 3 dimensions of normal space. By the sacred texts, breathed Elder Cyrex. It is just as the prophecies described. Even Ambassador Krell seemed momentarily stunned into silence, his skepticism giving way to wonder at the sight of a structure that defied physical laws. Grace approached what appeared to be an entrance, an archway that shimmered with the same purple energy that coursed through her veins. I have to go inside, she said. Alone. Tyler stepped forward. Grace, we don't know what's in there. It could be dangerous. She turned to him with a gentle smile. It was built for someone like me, Tyler. The danger would be in not fulfilling its purpose. She looked at the others. Wait here. This won't take long. Before anyone could object, Grace stepped through the archway and vanished. Tyler moved to follow but was repelled by an invisible barrier that now sealed the entrance. Inside the Nexus chamber, Grace found herself in a space that seemed both vast and intimate, as if it expanded or contracted to accommodate her presence. The walls, if they could be called that, pulsed with living light, forming patterns and symbols that she now recognized as the language of the Ascended Ones. At the center of the chamber stood a crystalline structure similar to the broken relic that had started her journey, but intact and far larger. As she approached, the crystal responded to her presence, illuminating with intense purple energy. Grace placed her hands on the crystal's surface, and immediately, a flood of knowledge poured into her mind, not chaotic or overwhelming as before, but ordered and accessible. She understood now that each Nexus chamber contained a fragment of the complete ascended knowledge, designed to be absorbed sequentially to allow the recipient's consciousness to adapt gradually. This first chamber contained the foundational principles, the history of the Ascended Ones, their journey from physical beings to transcendent entities, and their decision to leave behind the means for other species to follow when they were ready. Grace also received a clearer understanding of her own role. She was not merely a catalyst or a messenger, but a bridge, a being capable of existing in both physical reality and the higher dimensional planes that the Ascended Ones now inhabited. Her purple blood was the key that unlocked this potential, not just in herself, but in all humans who carried the dormant genetic markers. When she emerged from the chamber some time later, the waiting group noticed an immediate difference. Grace's transformation had progressed. The purple energy no longer merely flowed beneath her skin, but formed a subtle aura around her entire body. Her movements seemed more fluid, as if partially liberated from the constraints of gravity. "It worked," she announced, her voice carrying a new resonance. "The first nexus is activated." As she spoke, the temple began to shift again, not disappearing but changing its configuration. The spires realigned themselves, and a beam of purple energy shot skyward, piercing the atmosphere and extending into space. A beacon visible across thousands of light years. "What did you do in there?" Ambassador Krell demanded, his composure shaken by the display of power beyond anything in the Confederation's understanding. "I connected with the network," Grace replied. "This nexus will now serve as a transmission point, spreading the activation signal to compatible artifacts and individuals across this sector of the galaxy." "Compatible individuals?" Tyler asked. "You mean humans?" Grace nodded. "Primarily, yes. The genetic markers are most common in humans, though some other species carry fragments. Each activated nexus expands the network's reach and strengthens the signal." Elder Cyrex stepped forward. "The prophecies speak of changes that follow each temple's awakening, signs and wonders that herald the approaching ascension." "Yes," Grace confirmed. "As each nexus activates, the barriers between dimensional planes will thin. Some individuals will begin to manifest abilities as their consciousness expands beyond normal physical limitations." Ambassador Krell's alarm was evident. "You're saying humans across the Confederation will develop powers? Like yours?" "Not exactly like mine," Grace clarified. "I'm the primary vessel, the genetic match that the Ascended Ones designed their technology to recognize most completely. Others will experience partial effects, proportional to their genetic compatibility and personal readiness." She looked at the energy beam still shooting into space. "But yes, humans throughout the Confederation will begin to change. The old hierarchies based on species superiority will become increasingly meaningless as the ascension approaches." Krell turned away, activating his personal communication device to report these developments to the Confederation High Council. His whispered conversation carried tones of urgency and growing concern. "We should continue to the next nexus," Elder Cyrex suggested. "The prophecies indicate that all 7 must be activated in sequence within a specific time frame." Grace nodded in agreement. "The second nexus is located in the Orion Spur, on a moon your charts identify as Lumar 6. As they prepared to return to the shuttle, Tyler pulled Grace aside. "You're different," he said quietly. "Not just the glowing and the energy stuff. You seem more." Grace considered this. "I feel more connected to everything. The knowledge from the Nexus isn't just information. It's a different way of perceiving reality." She looked at her hands, where the purple energy danced beneath her skin. "I'm still me, Tyler. Just expanded." "I hope so," he replied, concern evident in his voice. "Because the galaxy is changing around us, and I'm not sure everyone is ready for what's coming." Tyler's words proved prophetic. As they journeyed to the second Nexus location, reports continued to flood in from across Confederation space. The activation of the first Nexus had indeed triggered widespread effects, subtle at first, then increasingly profound. On dozens of worlds, humans were manifesting abilities previously unknown to their species. Some displayed telekinetic capabilities, moving objects with their minds. Others demonstrated enhanced cognitive functions, solving complex problems that had stumped Confederation scientists for generations. Still others showed signs of extrasensory perception, communicating across vast distances without technology. More significantly, the social order was beginning to shift. Human workers, long relegated to menial positions, were increasingly being recognized for abilities that transcended their assigned roles. Some were spontaneously promoted to advisory positions as their enhanced cognitive abilities became evident. Others were forming new communities centered around the study and development of their emerging capabilities. The Confederation's response was predictably mixed. Some member species and factions embraced the changes, recognizing the potential benefits of what Grace had described as evolution rather than revolution. Others resisted fiercely, attempting to suppress human gatherings and contain the spread of what they termed the purple contagion. Ambassador Krell, to his credit, maintained a pragmatic stance. While clearly uncomfortable with the rapid changes to the established order, he recognized that attempting to stop the process was futile. Instead, he focused his efforts on ensuring that the transformation remained peaceful, intervening when necessary to prevent confrontations between conservative Confederation forces and newly empowered humans. The activation of the second nexus on Lumar 6 accelerated these changes. As with Tyrolean, a hidden temple materialized when Grace connected with it, and another energy beacon joined the first, creating a network node visible across the galaxy. When Grace emerged from this chamber, her transformation had progressed further. The purple aura around her body was now clearly visible to normal perception, and occasionally, her form seemed to phase slightly out of sync with physical reality. 2 down, 5 to go, she announced, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in ways that made some of the expedition members experience brief visions of other realities. The pattern continued as they visited the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Nexus locations, each activation expanding the network's reach and deepening Grace's connection to the ascended knowledge. With each step in her transformation, she became more adept at navigating between dimensional planes, sometimes seeming to disappear briefly before returning with insights from realms beyond normal perception. Throughout the journey, Tyler remained her anchor to humanity, the friend who reminded her of who she had been before purple blood and ancient prophecies had changed her life. He watched with a mixture of awe and concern as Grace evolved beyond what most would recognize as human, yet retained the compassion and empathy that had always defined her character. The transformation of the galaxy continued in parallel with Grace's personal evolution. By the time they activated the 5th Nexus, human society within the Confederation had been fundamentally restructured. No longer servants and laborers, humans were increasingly recognized as equals or even leaders in many fields. Their enhanced abilities, coupled with their natural adaptability, made them invaluable as the boundaries between dimensional planes continued to thin. More surprising was the effect on other species. While humans showed the most pronounced response to the ascension energy, individuals from many Confederation species began to manifest similar, if lesser, capabilities. This development confirmed Grace's earlier assertion that the ascension was not meant exclusively for humans, but was available to all who were ready to embrace it. As they approached the 6th Nexus location, a gas giant's remote moon in the Perseus Arm, a new complication arose. A Confederation battle fleet had taken up position around the planet, clearly intent on preventing their landing. The High Council has finally decided on direct intervention, Ambassador Krell explained grimly as they received the fleet's transmission ordering them to withdraw from the system. They fear what will happen when all 7 Nexus points are activated. They cannot stop what has already begun, Elder Cyrex declared, his belief in the prophecies unshaken despite the obstacle before them. Grace stood on the bridge of the hegemony vessel, contemplating the blockade with calm detachment. After 5 Nexus activations, she had evolved far beyond the timid human girl who had once dusted museum displays. The purple energy now formed complex patterns around her body, occasionally extending into geometries that hurt the eyes to look upon directly. "They're afraid," she said simply. "Fear is a natural response to fundamental change." Tyler, who had remained by her side throughout the journey despite his own struggles to comprehend the transformation he was witnessing, placed a hand on her shoulder. "What will you do?" Grace closed her eyes, reaching out through the network that now spanned much of the galaxy. "I'll show them what the Ascension truly offers." What happened next would be recorded in Confederation historical archives as the revelation of Perseus. Grace extended her consciousness through the network, touching the minds of every being aboard the blockading fleet. Not to control or manipulate, but to offer a glimpse, a momentary window into the reality that the Ascended Ones inhabited. For a brief instant, every officer, crew member, and soldier experienced a vision of transcendence. The freedom from physical limitations, the expansion of consciousness across dimensional barriers, the peaceful coexistence of entities beyond material form. They felt the potential within themselves, the dormant capacity for evolution that the Ascension would awaken. When the vision faded, the fleet's communication channels fell silent. Then, one by one, ships began to move aside, creating a clear path to the moon's surface. No orders had been given, no commands issued. Individual crews, from admirals to maintenance workers, had made a collective choice based on what they had experienced. "They understand now," Grace said softly as their vessel moved through the parted fleet. "Not completely. That's not possible without full ascension, but enough to make an informed choice." Ambassador Krell, who had experienced the vision alongside everyone else, appeared deeply shaken. "What I saw is that what awaits us all. It's one possibility," Grace replied. "The Ascension offers many paths, many forms of evolution. Each being chooses their own direction once the limitations of physical existence are transcended." The activation of the sixth nexus proceeded without further opposition. As with the previous locations, a hidden temple materialized when Grace connected with it, and another energy beacon joined the growing network. When she emerged this time, her transformation had progressed to a point where her human form appeared almost translucent, overlaid with patterns of purple energy that sometimes resolved into glimpses of higher dimensional structures. "One more," she announced, her voice now carrying harmonics that triggered synchronistic understanding in the minds of listeners. "The final nexus lies at the galactic core, on a world your charts named Centaurus Prime." The journey to Centaurus Prime was unlike any previous leg of their expedition. The galactic core was a region of intense stellar activity, radiation, and gravitational anomalies, normally impassable to Confederation vessels. But as they approached, Grace guided their ship through corridors of stable space-time that conventional sensors couldn't detect, navigating by her connection to the Ascended network rather than by traditional astrogation. News of their journey had spread across the galaxy. By the time they reached Centaurus Prime, ships from hundreds of species had gathered in the surrounding space, not to prevent the final activation, but to witness it. The transformation of the Confederation was already well underway, with old hierarchies giving way to new forms of cooperation based on mutual evolution rather than domination. Centaurus Prime itself was a small, rocky world orbiting close to the supermassive black hole at the galaxy's center. As their shuttle descended to its barren surface, Grace stood at the viewport, gazing at the spectacular vista of the core, millions of stars packed into a volume of space where their light created an eternal day. "This is where it began," she said softly. "The Ascended Ones originated here at the galaxy's heart. The seventh nexus is both the end and the beginning of the cycle." When they landed, Grace led them to a vast plain where geometrically perfect crystalline formations jutted from the ground. Natural structures created by the intense gravitational forces and radiation of the core region. Unlike the previous nexus locations, the temple here was already visible, a massive crystalline cathedral that pulsed with purple energy in anticipation of Grace's arrival. As they approached the entrance, Grace turned to address the group that had accompanied her on this extraordinary journey. Ambassador Krell, Elder Cyrex, Tyler, and all the others who had witnessed her transformation from human janitor to transdimensional being. What happens next will complete the cycle that began 50,000 years ago, she explained. The activation of the seventh nexus will fully establish the Ascension network across the galaxy. After that, each sentient being will have the opportunity to evolve, to transcend their current limitations if they choose. She looked directly at Tyler, who had remained her friend and anchor throughout. Some will choose to remain as they are, and that choice is equally valid. The Ascended Ones believed in evolution through free will, not through compulsion. Tyler stepped forward. Will we see you again? After you activate this final nexus? Grace smiled, though her face now seemed composed more of light and energy than flesh. I'll be changed, but not gone. The Harbinger's role doesn't end with activation. It transitions to that of guide. She extended her hand, and Tyler took it without hesitation, despite the energy that now composed much of her form. Thank you for believing in me, she said softly, for reminding me of my humanity even as I evolved beyond it. Then she turned and walked alone into the Crystal Cathedral. Unlike the previous Nexus chambers, this one did not seal behind her. The others could watch as she approached the central crystal formation, a massive geometric structure that pulsed in rhythm with the energy flowing through her transformed body. Grace placed her hands on the crystal, and the connection was instantaneous and profound. The knowledge and power of all 7 Nexus points flowed into her simultaneously, completing the transformation that had begun with a simple cut on her finger in a museum far from here. The purple energy exploded outward in a wave that engulfed first the cathedral, then the planet, then expanded beyond. A pulse of transformative potential that raced across the galaxy at speeds beyond the limitations of physics. It touched every world, every being, offering the choice that the Ascended Ones had prepared for 50,000 years, the choice to evolve beyond physical form, to ascend to a state of existence where consciousness was no longer bound by material limitations. In that moment, Grace Mitchell, once a human janitor, now the harbinger of ascension, fully comprehended the legacy she had inherited and the future she would help guide. Her consciousness expanded to encompass the galaxy, connecting with the minds of countless beings as they made their choice, to ascend or to remain. Many chose ascension, their physical forms dissolving into patterns of energy that joined a growing network of evolved consciousness spanning the galaxy. Others chose to remain in their current form, either out of preference or because they weren't yet ready for such a profound transformation. And true to the principles of the Ascended Ones, both choices were honored. Those who transcended did not abandon those who remained, but established new forms of communication and cooperation. The galaxy entered an unprecedented era of harmony as the artificial barriers between species gave way to mutual respect and understanding. Tyler Grant, standing at the entrance to the Crystal Cathedral, watched as Grace's physical form underwent its final transformation. The purple energy that had flowed through her veins now composed her entire being, a luminous, ever-shifting pattern of light and consciousness that maintained a recognizable human shape more out of choice than necessity. When she spoke, her voice resonated directly in the minds of all present. The ascension is complete, but the journey is just beginning. Each being in this galaxy now has the freedom to evolve at their own pace, to explore the infinite possibilities of existence beyond physical limitations. She extended a hand composed of pure energy toward Tyler. Some will choose to remain as guides for those who follow later. I am one of those guides. Tyler smiled, understanding now what his friend had become, not a deity or a ruler, but a bridge between realities, helping others navigate the path that she had been the first to travel. Across the galaxy, the purple energy continued to flow, offering each being the choice that defined the legacy of the Ascended Ones. the freedom to evolve through choice rather than compulsion, to transcend limitations while honoring the journey of all sentient life. And it had all begun with a human girl who cut her finger on a broken relic, whose purple blood had awakened a legacy 50,000 years in the making. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.